All right, so real quick video here for you guys. In the SubD workflow video, I mentioned about creating little shapes like this, but I didn't show how to do it, so that's what we're going to do in this one. And as a little bonus, I'll show you how you can create little doors for these types of pieces as well, so that way you can open and close them or whatever. Create little cavities and things like that. So let's go ahead and start in a new scene. I'm just going to use the default cube. Just keep in mind this is not a beginner tutorial at all. This is just a kind of a workflow demo of SubD modeling, I guess. And so let's just go with something like this. We want to make sure it's squared up relatively well. So we have additional pieces that we need to make these not so rectangular, right? A little bit more squared in nature. All right, subdivide that. I do want this to be a little sharper in that sense. So I'll do a quick mirror, shade it smooth. All right, turn off optimal display. You need to have a good amount of resolution to the mesh, but not too much. It's a little bit harder to do when you have more um, faces here. So something like this would probably work well, but this is a little much. So you have to be a little bit careful how you do this. We'll do it the hard way. So we'll do this one. But it's really not that hard. So basically, think like you want a section here. All right, so Control and Shift, you can click, select like so. Just delete it. No, it doesn't seem right, but you're going to select this edge. You're going to just extrude it out. In this case, X, Alt Z, Control Alt Shift S will allow you to skew. I'm going to hit Y in this case. You can see we can do this number. Now, I personally don't mind them having a little bit of a taper to them, so if you scale that in or something like that, it's not such a big deal. And with this edge selected, we can now hold Shift, Control click. We can select this edge, Control E, bridge edge loops. Okay, now the challenge here really is trying to figure out how you're going to get all this to become quads. So if I want this to become a quad here, it's going to be this edge that runs through. So I know I need one there. Probably going to need one here, right? And one there. Maybe one more. Something like that. And then also I might want some edges that go this way. So in this case, I think it's only going to be one, perhaps. Okay, so we'll try that. If I Control F, select this whole loop, Control F, grid fill it. You'll see it complains. It means it's not an even amount of edges. You need to have an even number. That will let you grid fill. So Control F, grid fill. You see right there, that's going on. It's not quite what I expected. You can change the span and the offset and also try simple blending as well until you get what you want. Otherwise, you'll have to do this manually, which kind of is no good, right? And so you can see here, that's not exactly what I want either. So we're going to play around with these numbers now. See if we can't get this going. More predictable manner anyways. In reality, it really doesn't matter necessarily. It could be pretty chaotic and messy, but this is what I'm looking for really in this situation, okay? Something nice and gridded up, basically. Same process over here. We want to match it. So we're going to try to do that. I forgot what numbers I use. Usually the same numbers will work, but not always. So that's pretty close. Quite. Let's try 4 again. Try one more. Yeah, that one's a little difficult, huh? I know it's close. It's gonna be up one. Yeah, something close to that. I don't know why this one decides to stretch out like that though. Let's bump this number down. You see it's kind of going back to that same setup. It's somewhere in here. It's real close. Worst case scenario, just delete it. Just press F. And unfortunately, it's just Nature of the workflow here, I guess. Sometimes you just got to do it. I'm not going to fight with it all day. Pressing J, we can join all these together. You can see I'm off, actually. Probably should have started on this side, but Control X to do those quick dissolves like that. That should get me going about there. All right. This one. Try going to there. We'll try going to there with this one. So we'll see what happens here in a second. Really just seems like it wants to do this number, right? Some kind of quad pattern going. Does not quite line up, does it? Wondering if we have the same amount of vertices here. So this is going to be 6 vertices, and this is going to be, should be 6, yeah. Yeah, it is. All right, try grid filling again. Try simple blending. Do one. This one goes up to there. Go up to there. But it doesn't. What is misaligned here? Something's misaligned. Oh, this one. Okay, okay. You see, this is actually messed up at the bottom. So I knew something was going on here. This is close though. And we can merge these. We can dissolve these two, potentially. Let's delete this real quick. It's just not working out quite the way I thought it would. It'd be better that way. Okay. That's a lot nicer. Boom. And it gets it the first time. Okay, so I just had too many edges. So it's fairly simple, but it can be a little tedious. You can hold Control and Shift and click around in here. That does like those little quad selections like that. And we're going to do an inset. We're going to check edge rail. A lot of times this will work, which is fine. We don't need a huge inset right now, but we can actually do that. And now we're going to do selection method more. We're going to do an outset. So press I, inset, and then hit O and to do an outset. You can get this going like that. So when we subdivide this, this is what we get. That's what we're looking for. And these sections here, you can still modify these a good bit. So if you wanted to, you could go to like the top view and still taper them and do things like that, right? If you wanted to. You'll have to shift your topology around a little bit. Something that'll save you here is a set flow add-on, which is extremely good in my opinion. So like this doesn't quite line up the way I think it should. It's set flow. If it doesn't work, you got to go into object mode, select your object, go back to edit mode, set flow. So that's going to kind of fix some of the little bit of the problem we had there. It doesn't fully fix it, but right. If you want to tighten corners up, you need to have enough faces to be able to do that. You're going to end up sliding things like that around. It may flatten out little sections. So a little bit of a denser mesh does help, but it takes a little bit longer to set this all up. Okay, so that's what you can expect. The kind of problems you'll run into, anyways. And then that's pretty simple, right? Like it's really not that hard. You can do it pretty much anywhere. Like even over here, you just knock it out. Same process. The only difference is you take these about halfway. Okay, so something about halfway. You can skew them or flatten them, press S and Z, do that number. But you're going to do the same process. Bridge the edge loops. It helps to have a little bit of a space in there. So we know this one's going to go here, and that will turn into a quad. So this is pretty low resolution for this one, I think, but should be able to just grid fill it like that. You can see that turns into 2 quads. Okay, so now you have little to no control to tighten up the edges, though. So you got to be, pay particular attention to that. What resolution you do this at, how many faces you have. Pretty important. Okay, but it still works. So if I was to select this area, let's try to get these selected too. You could use the cursor selector if it helps. The outset, we'll do the inset, so you just hit O to turn that back off. There we go. So now we have that going on. Fairly simple, right? Not as hard as you probably thought it was. Now, let's do little sections in here. Of course, you can grab like a whole section, something like that, inset it, hold control, and inset it, hold control again, inset it one more time, don't hold control. And you can do things like that, right? Very simple, straightforward. Same thing down here. You can do like an inset, hold control, that number. The only difference here is you actually need the topology here to be able to hold those edges a little bit sharper if you wanted it to. Okay. That topo. Let's do something like that. Anyway, so let's make the door. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, make a little seam. See, this is a loop here. If you do it right, you'll be able to get a loop at the top. It may not be very large. You might have to tweak it, but you can potentially just inset that, hit inset and hold control, and then do this number here. Maybe you want to like grab the edges, maybe slide them out a little bit. So GG twice. Do that number. Straighten it all up and all that fun stuff. But this going, we have a loop here. I find I like using the inside section a little bit more, but you could potentially go with the top one. So I'm going to select that whole loop, Shift D, duplicate it, P, separate the selection, go into object mode real quick. We're going to select the loop here, okay? And now we can go into edit mode, hit Alt Z so we can see it. Control F and grid fill it. I just wanted to prove a point here by doing this, okay? A lot of times you can actually get pretty much perfect topology while doing this. In this case, it actually dips in, so this is a bad example, but usually it'll actually work out, which is pretty phenomenal. So we'll turn simple blending on, see if that helps a little bit. Okay, so it's not too bad. It's not perfect the way I wanted. It has a little bit of a dip here at the front, which is kind of, it's actually following the topology. Yeah, so that's a little bit weird looking, but in this case, we can go ahead and just inset, hold control, and push it out like this a little bit, okay? Nothing too crazy. So when this subdivides, this is what we get, okay? You see that little section that we had done earlier kind of sticks through it. So we can always just go back and hit Alt S and just keep working it a little bit more so it sits on top of it perhaps or something like that. Or we can try to pick the top of the topology and work that instead. A little loop right here sometimes can be a lot better to work with. So let's do that. I usually go with the inner side, but this one might be the better scenario here. So Control F, grid fill it. You can see it's pretty much on point. But even with that, that's still sticking out, so we have to modify that. That's what's going on. And inset, hold control. We're going to push it in this time. All right. When we do that, there's actually a back face here that's, well, there's no back face, but there's a, kind of hard to see. Let's isolate it. There's nothing there, basically. So we can hold Control F, grid fill. You do that number. That. Okay. All backwards, select it all, press A, Alt N, recalculate outside or flip. One or the other, shade it smooth. There you go. That's pretty much as good as it's going to get right there on that piece. Whatever reason this was behaving badly, I'm going to just hit Alt S and push it in a little bit, see if that helps out. Hide this a sec. Sometimes things just don't go the way you think they should. Alt S, all of it, push it in. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll, maybe we can, let's delete all that real quick. Usually I just select something, I'll press F and I'll go all the way through. I'm going to redo that section real quick. All the way around. All right. It's a little bit too close to that edge. But making it a lot smaller might help as well. Okay. Making this a little thicker might help as well. Usually these line up no problem. So it's one time I do the video, right, the tutorial, it's going to do this, but normally you don't have any issues. But there we go. So we have that going on. Here's the trick with the door itself. You want to find the center of this edge. In this case, it looks like it's between these two, so we select both of them. Using machine tools, you can put the cursor to the edge. Now this is going to adopt the rotation of that edge as well. So if we were to use, instead of using global, we use local coordinates. We can press R and Y in this case, and we can just open it up. That simple, right? It's a good idea when you do this, if you're just playing around with it. Hold control while doing it so you can snap it an even amount. So when you go back the other way, you can just snap it back into place and not worry about it being misaligned or anything like that. And of course, you can always nudge this around a little bit. If it still doesn't quite line up, I find a lot of times you can select this loop all the way around the edge and just Alt S and push it out a tiny bit. And it's just going to tighten up that gap a little bit. And it doesn't look too bad either, so it seems to work, right? So it's pretty tight. It's not perfect perhaps, but it's really close, and it's more than okay for our purposes here in this video. In a rare situation, you get something like this going on. You'd want to fix that before you actually create the door, but just keep in mind, you can like slide things around a little bit and then slide them back. It just kind of helps flatten things out in those areas. See, that's almost gone at that point, so kind of an older technique, but um, yeah, that was probably just there from the beginning. Okay, so for the most part, that's pretty much it. It's really simple. It's not that hard, and you can still do like outsets on things like this. Maybe do a loop cut, bevel it, and set it in. You can make some little details like that. So this workflow is really robust. It actually works very well. You can mirror it over with Mesh Machine. You can mirror this object over as well. So now it's just using a mirror modifier basically. So if you were to rotate it, yeah, and just keep having fun, just go through your model and make the changes you want to make. See what you can end up with. Section here. Like you can use proportional editing for a lot of things. Just going to dip all that in a little bit with proportional edit. You can see that happens. These pieces I actually end with triangles, usually. Oh, this one I don't have to, I don't think. Yeah, I don't have to on this one. A lot of times I will, though. These are a little bit, you can see what happens here. Creates that little seam. So yeah, actually I do need to. Yep. I did it all the way out to there. I didn't see that. You can push all those in, merge it, and just mirror it. Bam. So when it ends with a triangle, it actually looks a little bit better in my opinion. So of course there's other topologies you can use. You can even add a support loop through here. So it's technically a quad at this point, by the way. It's not a triangle no more. So you can do things like that. Does create a little bit of a soft edge here though. Hard edges for this one is a little bit more challenging, but generally speaking, softer is not too bad. It just depends on how big your object is. So let's try doing this number through here. Do an inset. Pull it up. Skew it on, turn proportional edit off on Y. That. This one here. Just going to run it forward. This one backwards a little, if possible. I have to run all these backwards. Can't slide two at the same time. It's kind of interesting. So you can do things like that. Set, push it down, set it. Get something like that going. Take it back up. I think it makes it look nicer. Something like that going. Then break up the whole shape here. There's a couple different ways you could do this. I think I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to press K, C, and I'm just going to kind of cut it straight through this area. And all the way down to the bottom. down here. So this goes into that shape design video I did. This is very similar of a concept here. See how it's pretty simple, but it's a edge we can now grab onto. And once we grab all the pieces here, we can bevel it. Inset again, hold control. We can do a little section like that, right? So we may need to mirror that one over, right? But now we have the little doors and everything else. Spice this up a number of different ways. Just doing simple things like this, perhaps. Hold S to shift that real quick. Tighten up some edges. So you should start to get the idea here that this is a pretty robust way of working. It's not as I think a lot of people get like the wrong idea about SubD. They think it's like super complicated and hard. It's just a couple tricks here and there, and they start to add up. That's all it is, really. They really start to just add up, and it's not such a big deal after. I'm going to slide that forward, slide that forward. This one I'm going to align with the other two. So using machine tools, you can use that alignment tool, which works out pretty well. So now we had a little loop here I could use. There we go. See, it does create, if you're not careful with the resolution, you can create a lot of like soft corners and stuff, but you can always tighten those up if you have a decent resolution, right? So if you want them to be sharper. And there you have it. So now you know how to do the little sections like that. Very simple, not too hard. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will check you on the next one. All right, take care.